Shannon Garcia is a lifetime resident of the Inland Empire. Growing up in Colton, she dreamed of living in Redlands, which many called the jewel of the IE, and which Shannon saw as healthier and safer than surrounding cities. When the opportunity arose for Shannon to move to a home in Redlands with affordable rent and land for gardening and chickens, she was thrilled. But when a warehouse went up across the street, she watched as the natural surroundings began to suffer. Shan tried to rescue as many native plants as she could from the destruction.
There's a lot of casualties for this development, and so I'm just trying to do the decent thing, you know? To me, these plants are just like if I were to see a person, you know, like they're a living thing, and a lot of animals depend on it, not just me.
But native plants and animals were not the only ones affected. Shannon suffered for months, unable to sleep due to the noise and light pollution of round-the-clock construction. And the dust from construction caused her severe health issues.
Within the dust that kind of gets thrown up during those sites, you have particulate matter. So it's not just dust, you have mold, you have, depending on allergens that you have, you know, there's pollen, there's dander from animals, there's also feces. And it got so bad that people, myself included, were having to go to urgent care constantly, like every month, for just chronic things. Like at first it was just like sinusitis. You would just kind of get like sick and it wouldn't go away. I went from like not having an inhaler to having an inhaler and to having to wear a mask like 24/7 in my own home.
Shannon's partner, Marin, walked me across the street to the site. The construction caused his asthma to return after years of remission.
Mental health just like went way down because you feel just the degradation, you know, of your day-to-day life.
Though Shannon and Sean submitted numerous complaints across departments, and the fire department issued stop work notices to developers LDC Industrial Realty LLC, construction continued. Eventually, the couple were forced to relocate. In 2021, the Robert Redford Society at Pitzer College mapped over 1 billion square feet of warehouse development in San Bernardino and Riverside counties, a logistics hub so huge it is visible from space. Dr. Daniel Klooster of the University of Redlands has studied this development's impact on Redlands and the wider Inland Empire.
The stuff we consume that's made all over the world comes into the Port of Los Angeles, the Port of Long Beach. It gets put on containers and sent to warehouses where it is repackaged and reshipped and redistributed by truck to the rest of the United States. Every place that you go and interact at the retail level with the global economy, there's a warehouse behind it somewhere. And those warehouses are increasingly concentrated in areas like the Inland Empire and Redlands, but the Inland Empire more generally, where it's not that land is cheap, but it's cheaper than and more accessible, you can find it, than downtown LA or near Long Beach or near Port of Los Angeles.
Redlands was one of the last cities to cave, but over the past decade, industrial growth has exploded, particularly in what is known as the city's Eastern Valley Corridor, once prime agricultural land. Since 2013, Redlands has amassed over 5 million square feet of warehouses. The city's planning division stated they had no records pertaining to the number of exemptions to environmental review the city has approved during this time. Redlands is particularly susceptible to smog and other pollution.
Geographically, we're vulnerable in Redlands to poor air quality, and the warehouses make it worse.
To Redlands resident Shannon Garcia and others familiar with Redlands history, decisions about where warehouses are built are not surprising.
The way we had to grow up was there were very clear lines of like who had and who didn't. And you see that now, you know. You see that with the development sites.
Current industrial zoning and planned 2035 industrial development follow a historical division, visible in the two areas' differing street grids. The original Ligonia colony, born of a Mexican land grant whose streets run north and south, and Redlands, a colony founded by European settlers from New England whose streets run on a diagonal. Redlands Planning Commissioner Mario Saucedo is well versed in this early history.
At one time, it was the other way around. North Redlands had the prominent, the prestigious part of the community.
The South Side won its bid for the railroad, and when the city incorporated, the wealth shifted. Following World War II, the division deepened with redlining.
The blacks and the Hispanic, Latino community were steered toward North Redlands where they could buy with their GI Bill.
Residents of color experienced discrimination and segregation. Dr. Jennifer Tilton of the University of Redlands worked with students to map the segregation of public places in the city using oral histories. Planning Commissioner Mario Saucedo experienced this exclusion firsthand.
There were different times where we weren't allowed to go to the public pool, the public swimming pool. Only on one day where blacks and Mexicans would be gone, and then they would flush the water out and put new fresh water.
The inequity continues today. Online, current Lagonia District residents describe differences in city response time to complaints and a lack of sidewalk maintenance. Stephanie Hastings Miranda of Community Forward Redlands points out a shade divide between the two sides of the city. South Redlands has significantly more canopy cover, contributing to hotter temperatures and higher asthma rates for the north side's lower income residents. City Council member Jenna Guzman-Lowery has witnessed the inequities.
There's more issues of code enforcement over there. There's more policing over there. There's more issues in which there are members of that side of town who utilize emergency services as their primary care because they don't have access to appropriate health care, right? Things that are much bigger than our city. But that a pattern and a theme of that side of town, due to demographics, is that people have less access to resources, they have less access to care in those ways, that there is this overall dissolve, this overall eroding element that happens on the north side of town that can absolutely be supported by and mitigated by the city.
Meanwhile, the South Side has numerous wealthier white residents who speak out to defend the historic character of their community.
We as a city of Redlands, we're really rooted in historic architecture, and you can see it everywhere in our city.
But the North Side is an afterthought, or even a bargaining chip for conservationists on the South Side. In April 2022, citizens group Save Redlands Orange Groves, with former Redlands Mayor Bill Cunningham, dropped a lawsuit attempting to protect 58.6 acres in North Redlands in exchange for an agreement to conserve 6 acres on the South Side. The fact that vocal opponents of development show up much more often when it is proposed on their side of town is no surprise to Erin Perez Hagstrom, North Redlands resident and founder of Redlands for Smart Growth.
People say things like, oh, Redlands is the Beverly Hills of the Inland Empire or something. The nickname is the jewel of the Inland Empire. And so there's this wealth, that exists. Everybody has these huge lawns and they're using all this water. People talk about the small town feel of Redlands, and what they're really saying is they like Redlands because Redlands is white.
In majority Latino San Bernardino County, Redlands is almost 70% white. But with the citrus industry, which the town used to rely on, in decline, many claim Redlands does need new industries to support its economy. In the Inland Empire lately, that has meant logistics warehouses. And though opponents point to empty warehouse parking lots and increasing automation of jobs within these warehouses, union construction workers are still asking to build them.
But what about all of us that do this for a living, that need this for our benefits, that need this to provide for our children?
Many settle on supporting development, but only in the right place, which often means freeway access.
I do understand that we still like having access to distributed goods. That is going to be a necessity no matter where we are or what we do. But I do like the idea that we need to look at this, say these are areas that are safe to have them.
Though limiting industrial development to areas close to freeways is not as glaring a bias as Cunningham's legal decisions, Perez Hagstrom, whose family has lived in the area since it was Mexico, says using this as a guideline continues the city's century-plus of race and class inequity, as freeway locations, too, are markers of historical bias and development here results in poorer environmental outcomes for lower income residents.
My family did not benefit from a freeway being placed directly on top of an elementary school right next door to their house.
You don't have to look for a plot to understand why this is happening, but you don't need a plot to see this as an environmental injustice. So there is a juxtaposition of land availability, previous orange groves, access to interstate, the I-10, the 215, all of that infrastructure, and that's enough. But like you said, that's built on a history of injustice.
Councilwoman Jenna Guzman-Lowery says perhaps for the first time, drawing a line, whether based on the original colonies, the freeway, or zoning maps, will not protect South Redlandsers from negative impacts.
It still is a part of our airspace that we breathe, that like a bunch of warehouses were there or on the outer outskirts of the city, like it still affects us. Still, it's important to care about and to think about.
In summer 2022, Redlands had numerous days where ozone exceeded state standards. For Jenna Guzman-Lowery, the only solution lies in genuine community care.
There are pockets of the community that have access to more resources, to distribute them in ways that improve the lives of the north side of town is automatically going to improve the lives of the south side of town, because then both sides of town get to appreciate the whole of the city without this feeling of a divide or these thoughts of like this certain part of town, you know. Yeah. By caring for each other, we all benefit.
For now, however, opposition to industrial development remains primarily restricted to those who are most directly affected, and city officials say they are only able to consider individual projects rather than cumulative impact. In June 2022, Redlands approved a moratorium on new warehouse applications, but we're still considering projects whose applications were already in the pipeline. At a hearing on a new plastics manufacturing facility on New Jersey Street, directly across from the warehouse that impacted Shannon and Sean, they spoke out vehemently against the project.
Shame on you. Shame on you guys.
If you want us to trust, after all that approving another development on the same street with exemptions is going to keep us safe?
The Planning Commission approved it.
Being on Planning Commission or any public body is not easy. You always have to strike a balance between commerce and the safety of individuals.
I'm bound by what is put in front of me, and so I will be in favor of this project should there be a vote for it.
In late July, a Planning Commission meeting revealed only 5% of land zoned for industrial development is still vacant, and city staff provided a list of proposed development standards, including that new warehouses must be constructed within 1 mile of a freeway entrance, and no warehouses larger than 150,000 square feet can be built south of Interstate 10 and east of State Route 210. They will vote at a later meeting. In November 2022, Redlands voters will decide on Measure J, which would increase the business license tax on warehouses and distribution centers from 4.7 cents per square foot to 10.5 cents per square foot. But Shannon Garcia doesn't feel any of this goes far enough, nor does it give her hope for her future in Redlands.
Our communities were sacrifices for this type of development because nobody thought about us, about the health risks. Everyone just thought about the profit, and everyone continues to think about the profit.